Hello. The future is electric. If we want to fight the climate catastrophe that is happening right now, we have to electrify the whole economy in order to be able to get rid of fossil fuels. So this topic we're going to talk about now, electricity markets, is very important. It's going to be very important in the future. We have already talked a little bit about electricity markets in the initial sessions. We're going to now look into what happens in these markets in more detail and how the prices are formed. All right, so please go through the handouts here. Read. I think everything is more or less clear here in the handouts. There are a lot of details here that you can read on your own about generation, transmission, distribution, demand, the retail demand, and wholesale demand. So let me pause here a little bit. So these two types of demand, there is a market for retail customers like me here at my home. I have a price for electricity. Then this individual demand is aggregated and becomes a wholesale demand. So what you see here is the sum of all these individuals turning on their lights and demanding this amount of electricity. And this will be a separate market where we will that we will discuss in a second how prices are formed here. But what I want to highlight here is that there is seasonality in demand. So this market is the PJM market, the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland market that we looked at in the first class. And it is one of the most sophisticated electricity markets in the world, so that's why we will keep referring to it. And so what you see here are four curves. These dashed lines are off-peak seasons, if you will, so it's the spring and autumn. But then the interesting parts here are these two lines. The blue is cold, is winter, and the red is hot, is summer. So what you see here is the demand. Let's think of the blue line, the demand throughout the 24 hours of the day. This is a specific day in the winter. So people are asleep, demand is low. Then people start waking up, demand goes up. People are turning on their lights, cooking breakfast, and so on. Then throughout the day it decreases a little bit, and then in the night people come home again and start cooking dinner and turning on the heaters and so on, and demand goes up for some hours, and then people go to sleep. So there is this typical seasonal, typical pattern throughout the day. So different kinds of seasonality here actually. There is this daily seasonality, and then there is this yearly seasonality that we are discussing. So this is winter, and now this is summer. Again, people are asleep, people start to wake up, and then demand goes up. And now this pattern here is specific to the region in the world where you are. So think for a second, can you guess why demand is going up so much more than in the winter in this area here? So this is the east coast of the US. A lot of demand of electricity throughout the day. It's really peaking here in the afternoon, 3-4 p.m. and then it comes down at night. So to understand these dynamics, you really have to think what is going on in this particular area of the world. So what is driving this increase in electricity? Air conditioning here. It's very hot, very humid in the summer, so people require a lot of air conditioning. If you look at the demand curves for other areas of the world, like here in Portugal, you will not see this spike here during the summer. So these seasonal patterns that you observe are very specific to the region of where we are. Okay. All right. So how does the market work? So this is the interesting part of this market. It's a very unique market in the way that prices are determined. So the idea is the following. The market runs in a sequence from the previous day until the actual second where electricity is being consumed. The first step is called the day-ahead market. If you look at this figure, it shows this sequence. The day-ahead market, it's run at noon of the previous day, and it's an auction that runs at this point and determines the price and quantities for all the hours of the following day. So each hour it's like an independent auction, and for that hour we are determining now at noon of the previous day what will be the price and quantity for that hour. So for hour 1, then another auction for hour 2, another auction for hour 3, and so on. So here you can actually think of this as 24 markets running at noon for the 24 hours of the following day. Okay. So here we can forecast how much electricity we are going to need and do this auction, but obviously we cannot know for sure how much electricity it's going to be consumed in the following day. So we will have to adjust this quantity. So there are, second step, there are intraday markets where as we get closer and closer to the actual delivery date, hour, we have a sequence of smaller auctions. So we have an auction here for the following hours, then we have another auction here to adjust production to the forecast of the following hours, and so on. So we keep adjusting, making small adjustments to the production, given that we have more precise forecasts of what will be the demand in the coming few hours. And then even though the forecast is a bit better, it's not perfect. So when we get to the real second where electricity is being consumed, we have to make sure that production is exactly equal to demand, to consumption, and therefore we have a third stage, which is real time. So there, second to second, the generation is being adjusted to match exactly how much is the demand. So these three stages in this market sequence. Right. You can read through the details here. So let's see exactly how the price is determined. So most of the energy is traded in the first stage, in the day-ahead market. So we're going to see how the price is determined in that market. So the idea is the following. We're going to form a generation stack, which is basically a stack, an ordering of the generators from the lowest to the highest price. Okay. So this typically we give the name of baseload plants to the ones that have the lowest price and that are first dispatched. So they are in the base of the generation stack. Typically, these firms here are like that. They have the lowest price. Then we have a middle layer, a middle merit plants. And then at the top we have a picking plant, which will be the ones that have the highest price, and we will only dispatch this if at the very high peak moment. So for example, these peak generators will only be used here in the summer when demand is at the very highest levels. Okay, most of the year they will be idling, not generating. Okay, so the result is a figure that looks like this. So we are ordering the producers, the generators, from the lowest price to the highest price, and we make a supply function like this, right? And now the important part is the following. The price that clears the market is the price of the last generator. So suppose that demand is at this level here. We expect demand to be we expect demand to be around here. It's about 145 gigawatts. And we look at the price of the last generator in the stack, and that price, in this example 150, it's the market clearing price. Meaning what? Meaning that this price is going to be received by everybody that is dispatched. So all these generators here in the lower part of the curve. So there is an example here. Basically, to do the stack and to find the market clearing price. So let's say that for a given hour tomorrow, we expect this demand, and then we have these generators submitting these quantities that they can generate and submitting these prices. And the goal is to sort them and then determine the market clearing price. So where do these prices come from? So some of them we have already seen in previous chapters. Like for example, we saw how to determine the price of a coal generator. So exactly the calculations we did before, natural gas and so on. Diesel peaker as well. The price of wind is zero. Why is that? I mean, if you think of wind, Wind has a marginal cost of 0. Once you have the turbine built, then generating 1 unit of electricity is basically free because wind is free. If you had solar generator here, it would be the same thing, right? Hydro behaves in a slightly different way. There are different types of hydro, which are discussed throughout the notes. For example, this one here, run of river, this is a turbine that is on the river, and they either use the water that is flowing at that moment, or they don't use it at all. So their marginal cost is 0, and they really want to be dispatched, because otherwise they will not be able to use the water that has already passed, so they will be the price of 0. Hydro dams are different because those can store water and can decide when to produce, so they will behave in a strategic way. Okay, so let's look at this market here, and let's do the stack. Let's order these generators. So the first one that will be dispatched will be wind at the price of 0. Then will be hydro at the price of 0. The next one will be nuclear at the price of 1. So we keep ordering these generators until we reach the demand. The solution is here. I'm going to post this here. So as I was saying, wind for 5,000 megawatt hours, total 5,000. Then hydro 5,000. The total is at 10,000. Nuclear another 20,000. The total is 20 plus 10, 30. Coal another 45. 30 plus 45, 75, and so on. We keep adding them up until we reach demand, which was forecasted to be 100,000. So at that point we stop, and the last price, which was submitted by this open cycle gas turbine, is 40. And this again becomes the market clearing price, meaning that, for example, wind, even though it bid at 0, it's going to be paid 40 for each of the 5,000 megawatt hours it generates. Okay. So going back to the handouts, there are some different alternatives of how prices. Sorry, let me turn off something here. There are different market structures in the sense that in some markets there is a price. There are a lot of prices on the network, and this is called locational marginal price. This is the case for that PJM market that we have been looking at. Let me pull it up again. So for this market, which is this area here, you don't have just one single price. What you have, it's a bunch of prices. You have all these. If you look at these things here, you have a bunch of different prices. These are all different points on the network, each one with its separate price. This one here, it's usually one of the main reference prices in this market. And it was this one that we looked at in the first class, and we saw this one moving a lot. Okay. In other countries, the structure is different. Instead of having multiple prices, we have just one price for the whole market. So, for example, in Portugal, there is just one price for everybody from north to south. In other European markets, it tends to be like this. So, for example, in Germany, it's also like that. You have one price for the whole market. Please read through this. This discusses a bit why prices are so volatile in this market, and the main idea here comes from this mechanism we just saw, which is first there is no storage capacity, or it's very small. I mean, there are some batteries that are being developed, but at this point the amount of storage is very small. We have to match production with supply, production with demand at all times. But if you think about how demand works, demand comes from people at their houses turning on their light switches at any moment. And for individual consumers, the price is fixed over a given period, say 1 year, for example. And when I go to turn on my light switch, I don't think what is the price of electricity right now. I just turn it on and I don't worry about it, right? So this means that demand is inelastic. It does not respond to prices. So demand has its own fluctuations, and that creates, if you go back to this figure here, that creates volatility in this demand here, and you can see if demand jumps from here to here just a little bit, the price moves a lot from a very high price to a very small price. So these fluctuations here in demand that have to be matched by these suppliers creates a lot of volatility in market prices, in wholesale market prices, not in retail, but in wholesale market prices. Okay. What we expect to happen in the future, this is a forecast of the generation in coming years. The main thing here is that renewables are going to increase. I mean, it's either that or we are all that. So hopefully this will increase by replacing mostly coal, which is the more polluting fossil fuel. Gas, it's kind of going to last for some years due to its low price, and it's not that bad in the sense that it is, of the fossil fuels, it's the one that pollutes the least. Just one more concept here. We talked about the heat rate before. There is a similar concept here, which is the market implied heat rate. And here the name, it's a bit misleading. The market implied heat rate, it's defined as a ratio of prices. And now it's the price of the output, the power price, over the price of the input. Basically, this is used just to do this comparison. Once you have the heat rate, which recall was just a weird measure of efficiency, but if you the heat rate was just basically how much heat you need to have to generate 1 unit of electricity, right? So if you now compute this market implied heat rate, you can easily tell whether the power plant is in the money or not by looking at this ratio. Okay, so basically this just tells you that when this ratio of prices is higher than the heat rate, it is profitable for the firm to produce. There's a very simple example here. You can look at this. I think it's very trivial. Again, the point here is just to make you aware that there is this terminology used sometimes and how it works. What's the point? This is a description of different market structures. The US markets and the European markets have a slightly different organization structure. This is a bit of a detail, so I think you can skim through this part without going into much details. Okay, and this is just a summary of the differences between what happens in physical spot markets and what happens in financial forward markets, which we'll look at in the following chapters. All right, that's it.